Came as a complete surprise. The first two pregnancies were fairly normal, and all of a sudden, this is anything but normal. And you feel like you're being drawn to the edge of this cliff, and you realize you don't know what comes next. You really don't. I mean, it's a pretty serious situation. Your wife's been hemorrhaging. You're looking at potentially having a, physically handicapped baby. I'm sitting there holding Becca's hand, and it was very hard.
Woke up at like 2 in the morning and felt this gush, and I thought maybe my water had broken.
Becca shook me awake and said, "I'm bleeding."
I wasn't even 24 weeks at that time. I was 23 and a half. And I looked down and I was just covered. The bed is just a pool of blood and covered in blood.
We took off, got to the hospital, pulled in, got Becca checked in.
We did a sonogram, everything looked fine. They told us that it was a girl for sure. And so we thought, oh good, so with Charlotte Love, we're going with that name. So we started praying for her immediately. They had a specialist come in and do a sonogram.
And he said, we need to have a serious conversation about what you're going to do with the pregnancy.
Do you want us to try to save this baby, or do you want to just let it go? I didn't even blink. Of course, we wanted to work to try to save the baby.
It went from we're gonna try and get Charlotte to stay there till 30 weeks, and then we're shooting for 26 weeks, and then it got to be we're shooting for a few more days here. They kept on coming in and saying, here are the odds. They're pretty steep odds. If your baby lives, these are the odds of potential eye damage, potential brain damage, bleeding on the brain, all these things that will probably significant chance of them taking place.
I prayed expecting that God was going to keep her safe.
It was the terror of the unknown, but then it goes back and you start thinking through it and you realize it's not the unknown. He knows. And he either is God or he isn't God. And if he is God, he's taking his hand and taking the next step.
I actually that night started hemorrhaging again, and they said, this doesn't look good. You might have the baby in the next couple hours. They did a sonogram that showed that I was forming blood clots on my uterus and that it was affecting the baby and causing trauma. And my water had broken over the night, and they said, we need to take the baby now.
He was born at exactly 24 weeks.
Nothing prepared me for how teeny she was, and just her skin was just translucent and just so helpless, the feeling, so helpless.
Putting my hand in there, and her hand was so tiny it wouldn't fit around, my forefinger.
I didn't realize a baby could be born being that small and that they would have a chance.
The day she was born, I took my wedding ring off and I put it around her upper arm, and there was room to spare. There was a lot of room to spare.
The NICU is, one big roller coaster ride.
Constant prayer, constant questioning. I'm not gonna lie. There were, like, I don't understand. Do you know you're in control? But there's always that human, I don't understand and I want to understand, and you don't.
I had to totally rely on God, and I was in the Word every day, and there were moments where I was, sobbing and crying out to him and, help me get through this.
Just constantly praying for Becca, praying for Charlotte. Yeah, it was a running dialogue.
More than one occasion, alarms going off and all the doctors and nurses coming over there and opening the top of her incubator and coming in and giving her breathing treatments, and, oh, this is really scary, Mom, get out of the way, get out of the way. And just kind of, just that helpless feeling. And so every day up until Christmas was kind of like that. What am I going to expect today in the NICU when I go in there? You can't dwell on what could be, but you have to really trust that whatever happens, just live in the moment and enjoy the time that you have.
She'd been on the vent the entire time, and it was discouraging. They say after a certain amount of time on the vent, lung damage, eye damage, all these things, that the odds increase.
Christmas Day was really the turnaround point, because that was the day that she came off the ventilator. She didn't look to have any long-term brain damage, or her eyes were starting to clear up. That was kind of the turning point. as far as, when I felt like she was going to be okay.
She was born November 4th. We got to bring her home March 6th. So she was in there 4 months and a couple days. We brought her home on a heart and breathing monitor. But to be able to walk out of the hospital with her in her little car bed and realize, the 4 months plus, it was finally over.
Looking at her now, everybody, and even the doctors especially the doctors that see those babies, are just amazed.
Nobody would know that this little girl was born 4 months premature, was 1 pound 7 ounces, 12 inches. You'd never know it now.
She is a true testimony of God's power and the power of prayer. I mean, we had so many people praying for us when she was in the NICU.
The odds that there'd be bleeding on the brain, that there'd be eye damage, there'd be lung damage, all these things, and there was never once any of those. It's a miracle.
Seeing her in the NICU, I didn't. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't say that at any moment that I had control over any of that. That was God's working in her life. It was a miracle, but it was God's work. And just giving it to God every day and taking your requests to Him and taking one day at a time.
You were asking, what have you learned? What are some of these things that have come out of this? Still believe miracles happen. Still believe they happen. I saw one.